The tavern quieted on its own this time. Jonty hadn't asked for silence. The clatter of dice and tankards simply thinned as his fingers found a low, thoughtful chord on the lute. "You've heard how it ends," he said, his voice softened by age but carrying cleanly. Dark trees broken, sky cleared. Songs and statues and all the pretty lies that come after a victory. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. But a war never starts in a throne room. It starts in places like this. Smoke-stained rafters, mud on the floor, and one fire left burning. He let the note fade, then began. That morning on Darian's farm, the blue trees were all unnecessarily uneasy. Their leaves shivered without wind, and the hum of the network had picked up a sour undertone, like a choir gone slightly off key. Ronan felt it in his teeth before he stepped outside. He paused in a low hallway, and resting briefly on the bedroom door he had left an hour earlier. Inside, Nara, the old grey and white, had been curled up in the middle of his bed, fur like spilled ash and snow, purring as she filled the room with field gossip. She had gone from the mice to the badgers to the fox that she personally chased off last spring, as if she was still a kitten and not a creaking matron of the yard. A few words of wild speak had opened the floodgates. By the time Ronan managed to yawn his way free, Nero had only circled back to the Rowans and their plans to annex his windowsill. "Strictly off limits," he promised her, scratching behind her ears. "See that you remember, young one," she replied, whiskers quivering with satisfaction before settling in beside him, a warm, thrumming weight that finally left his mind unclench. Now, with the first light edging past the shutters, he carried that warmth with him like armor. He stepped out into the yard. The air had a thin, waiting quality. Mornings sometimes get too quiet, too bright. Scrala in falcon form carved impatient circles above the farmhouse, wings flicking as she tested the currents. Each pass took her a little higher, a little sharper, as if she was itching for something to strike at. In the doorway, Maylis leaned against the frame, arms folded, eyes half-lidded in that way that suggested she saw everything but would admit to nothing. Beside her, Jonty adjusted a leather strap on his travel bag with more fuss than was strictly necessary, trying to look like a man in no hurry at all. Ronan planted his staff in the packed earth. The blue trees' hum thickened, pressing at the edge of his thoughts, patterns twisting into shapes that had no business being there. "Malgara's corruption is moving," he said, letting the words cut through the morning. "Before nightfall she'll have eyes everywhere. We have to cut the tendrils before they root any deeper." The statement didn't need answering. The trees answered it for them, leaves rattling with a dry, dissonant shiver. "Jonty? Maylis?" Ronan said. The bard straightened, pushing stray hair behind his ear. Maylis didn't move. Her attention sharpened, pupils narrowing on him like a cat scenting weather. "Take the horses," Ronan went on. "Warn the farms before the guildmen tighten their patrols. All tracks if you can. Main road only if you must. Jonty mustered a crooked grin. The song travels faster than trouble. Oh, so I've been told. This time Ronan replied, see if you can travel faster than that song. His gaze slid to Maylis, softer for a breath. And Jonty? Take care of her. Jonty started to promise something foolish and sweeping, but Maylis cut off with a small, short snort, pushing away from the door. I can take care of my calf, she said, though she did cross to the horses without being asked, hands already moving to check straps and buckles with quick, efficient motions. Jonty joined her, fingers brushing hers softly as he tightened the girth. The horse tossed his head. Maylis soothed it with a low murmur, eyes on the leather, not on him. Thanks, he said. She shrugged. Can't have you falling off before you've done your job. He put his foot in the stirrup, hesitated. You'll be fine, he added softer. I meant the people. Kindness lands harder than steel. They will remember who rode out. Maylis's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. Then let's make sure there's something left to remember. She swung into the saddle with practiced ease. Her silence after that was his own kind of answer. From the open window of Ronan's room, Nero appeared, front paws on the sill, tail curled neatly around her old bones. She blinked at the yard with calm curiosity, as if assessing yet another of the farm's small passing dramas. When Jonty and Maylis let the horses out, she gave a dignified little brrr. Nothing like Shadow's sharp orders or Spunky's cheeky sing-song, but enough to be a farewell for those who knew her. Ronan lifted his staff. Windstrider! The air thickened, folded and tore. From a seam in the light, the Windstrider uncoiled, scale-slicked body in shades of cloud and steel, wings unfurling wide enough to cast half the yard in a shadow. Mist streamed from its pinions, catching the dawn in bright, cold shots. It lowered its head, breath smelling faintly of rain on stone. Skryla tucked her wings, then shot upwards, claiming the space above like a thrown spear. Ronan mounted, settling into the familiar saddle. For an instant he looked back at the farmhouse window, at Nara's small watchful shape, at Jonty and Maylis with the horses, at Lauren and Allera visible through the kitchen doorway, hands full of jars and baskets, at Elias by the hearth, one hand still smudged with charcoal from last night's maps. Hold the line, he said. We will take the fight to the root. The Windstrider launched. Wind roared through the yard, tugging at cloaks and hair, sending dust and straw into a spinning halo. Skryla's shadow crossed the farmhouse one last time. Then they were nothing but dwindling shapes against the brightening sky. Their absence left a silence all of its own. Maylis exhaled through her nose, sharp and controlled. Well, she said, let's go upset some farmers. Jonty laughed, because the other option was standing very still and listening to his heart, trying to escape his ribs. Lead on, dagger girl. I'll try to keep up. They swung into the saddles properly, reins creaking, hooves thudding as they turned down the lane. As they rode past the sidewall, Jonty glanced up. Nero watched them with regal calm, tail tip flicking once. For the moment he had considered tossing her a line of wild-speak goodbye, but Ronan's earlier escape came to mind. Foxes, robins, mice litters, and then back again. He decided silence was kinder to his schedule. He tipped 2 fingers to his brow instead and said, "Guard the place, old lady." Nara blinked as if she approved of the promotion. She hid it well. The horses took the rutted track, heading towards the patchwork of distant farms and the first hard conversations of the day. Across the back fields, Dorian was already moving, armor buckled, cloak catching the light as he strode towards the tree line. Where Jonty's steps always seemed to wander, Dorian never wasted a stride. He paused long enough to watch the Windstrider become a speck in the sky. The old soldier's face did not change, but his hand tightened once on the leather strap of his scabbard, knuckles whitening and then relaxing, as though he was sheathing a thought as carefully as any blade. Near the corner of the house, Elias straightened from the woodpile, giving Dorian a brief, uncertain nod. Dorian returned it with the same economical gesture he had given Jonty, a recognition that everyone had their orders now. "See that you listen when the trees complain," Dorian said to Elias. "They are often right." Elias blinked, halfway to asking what that was supposed to mean, but Dorian was already gone, boots darkening with dew as he crossed into the higher grass. At the edge of the fields he stopped and lifted 2 fingers to his lips. The whistle he gave was a low thrumming note that seemed to sink into the soil more than travel through the air. The blue touch grass shivered. The shade beneath the trees thickened. A shape slipped through between the trunks. First one, a warwolf, then another, then half a dozen, grey bodies flying over the ground with a silent predatory grace. Their eyes caught the morning light, bright with hard, clear intelligence. Behind them came the battle bears, dark hulks, moving with massive inevitability of boulders learning to walk. The largest warwolf padded up to Dorian and bumped his hand with his head. He rested his palm between his ears, fingers digging briefly into the fur. "War is on the wind," he murmured, "but we will choose where it lands." One of the younger wolves gave a quiet whine, glancing skyward in the direction Ronan had flown. Dorian's gaze followed for a heartbeat. "They will do their part," he said. "We will do ours." The battle bears huffed, steam ghosting through their nostrils in the cool air. They were not creatures bred for stealth, but when they followed Darian into the forest, the trees seemed to lean aside, branches lifting just enough to let them pass. Within a dozen of strides, man and beast were swallowed by shadow and green, their presence marked only by a fading tremor in the ground. Back at the farmhouse, another kind of preparation continued. In the kitchen, Lauren and Allera picked their way through a small chaos of jars, baskets and cloths spread across the table. Sunlight slanted through the window, catching the floating dust and the occasional lazy bee that had found its way inside. "Allera, if we take any more, we will need a wagon," Lauren said, eyeing the growing stack of jars. "We will need all of this if things go the way Ronan thinks," she replied, tying off a bundle with a cloth. "You have seen what the hives do to winds. I'm not coming back here mid-battle just because you were frugal with honey." Lauren winced as yet another bee drifted past his ear, its wings humming a tiny insistent drum. "I'm not frugal, I'm practical, and I'm mildly opposed to being stung." She gave him a sideways look, lips twitching. "The bees like you. They can smell fear. It's entertaining. That's not how it works." "Tell me the last one that landed on your nose." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again, because she was right, and both of them knew it. Instead, he reached for the last wicker basket, checking the handles. Outside, the distant hum of the real hives threaded through the air, steady, low, a choir hidden behind the hill. The land beneath them was blue tree touched. Even people who didn't believe in such things had stopped pretending that it was ordinary when burnt soldiers began healing faster than normal with a smear of that honey touched on their wounds. Allera stepped close, looping a length of cloth over his shoulder to secure one of the smaller jars against his stride. His finger brushed the back of his neck, light and brief. "You don't have to come," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "You could stay here, help Elias, keep Nara from convincing Ronan to reorganize the entire farm around the Robin gossip." Lauren snorted. "Leave you alone with the hives? Then who would the bees bully?" "There it is," she said softly. "Bravery at last." He rolled his eyes, but the set of his shoulders shifted, gathering itself. "Come on then, before I remember why I'm terrified." They stepped out into the yard, baskets and jars clinking softly. From the bedroom window, Nero watched them as she had watched the others, eyes half-lidded, tail tucked neatly around her paws. Lauren gave a little salute with one of the empty baskets. "If the robins try to take my room," he called, "tell them it's strictly off limits." Nera's whiskers twitched. That, from her, counted as a blessing. Hand in hand, he and Allera followed the faint gathering buzz towards the rise where the hives sat, small squares in order on a hill the blue trees had quietly claimed. When the kitchen door opened and shut behind them, the farmhouse finally fell still. Only Elias remained in the main room, standing near the hearth where last night's fire had settled into a crust of grey and orange. He held a bit of charcoal between his fingers, idly sketching lines in the ash on the stones, a habit he had picked up from Ronan's maps. 4 tracks, 4 directions, sky, road, forest, hill. He brushed the lines away with the side of his hand, listening to the new silence, where the others' voices, the blue trees hum, pressed more clearly at the edges of the hearing, like a distant crowd muttering in another room. "You're frowning again," a voice said near his knee. Elias looked down. Nara had left the window and padded into the common room without him noticing. Her grey and white fur only slightly ruffled from the climb. She sat primarily on the hearthstone, tail curled around her paws, eyes fixed calmly on her face. "Oh, this is you." And then he caught himself. "Oh, sorry, I meant good morning." She blinked, unimpressed. He hesitated, slipping into wild speak, a lilting cadence that never came as smooth at his tongue as it was on Ronan's. "You've chosen a good spot, old friend." "That's because I have better sense than you tall folk," she replied at once, her voice rich and unhurried in his mind. "You scattered to the edges when the wind turned strange. I stay where the beds are warm and the mice are predictable." Elias huffed a small laugh. "Everybody has their duties." "Yes, mine involves naps. Yours, it seems, involves staring at nothing until your face folds onto itself." He scrubbed his hand over his brow, just thinking. "Dangerous habit," said Nara, "especially when done standing up. Come, walk." She hopped lightly off the hearth, landing with a soft thump, and padded towards the open back door. "I don't think I have orders to follow the cat," Elias said to himself. Nara paused in the doorway, glancing back over her shoulder. "You have orders to listen," she said, "and I'm talking." It was difficult to argue with that. With a resigned sigh, he set the bit of charcoal down and followed her into the yard. Outside, the day had brightened, but the light had that too sharp edge the blue trees sometimes gave it. Nero trotted ahead, ears pricked, moving with the measured assurance of someone who had patrolled this land for more seasons than he had been alive. "Where are we going?" he asked. "The place that has been bothering me," she replied. "Near the lower field. The soil hums wrong, and the mice are telling stories they're not clever enough to invent." "That sounds bad." "Sounds interesting," Nero corrected. "Bad is when the grain runs out and someone locks the cream in the pantry." They crossed the yard, passing the empty hitching post where the horses had stood. The grooves of wagon wheels and boot prints crisscrossed the packed earth, tracks already starting to blur at the edges. Overhead, the blue trees' branches knitted together to form a lacework of shadows, the hum of the network pulsing slowly in uneasy waves. Elias fell a step behind Nara as she slipped through a gap in the fence into the lower pasture. The grass here brushed his knees, dew soaked into the hems of his trousers. Each time his boots rustled through the stalks, the sounds seemed almost too loud. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Nero said. "This is why we are going." They crested a slight rise. From here Elias could see all the paths the others had taken, the faint dust hanging where Ronan and Scrila had torn into the sky, the darker line of the lane where Jonty and Maylis had followed, the notch in the trees where Dorian and his beasts had vanished, the distant pale dots of hives on a hill where Lauren and Allera were already climbing. 4 threads pulled outward, Nero continued down the far slope toward a patch of ground where the grass grew thinner and the soil through greyish streaks. Even before he reached it, Elias felt a low, wrong vibration at his feet, out of sync with the rest of the land's quiet heartbeat. The blue trees hummed diptier, as if their song were bending around a note it didn't like. Nero stopped at the edge of the patch, her tail puffed slightly. Her voice stayed calm. "There! Do you hear it?" Elias crossed his eyes, reaching with the part of him that Ronan kept insisting was there, the part where the druids had called out to him. The usual web of life threaded under his awareness. Roots drinking, worms turning earth, mice skimming in the balm. But here, something else pushed up from beneath, like a bruise forming under the skin of the form. "I hear something," he said slowly, "like a knot in a song." "Good," Nero replied. "Then you can help me untie it before it grows teeth." She padded forward and sat directly on the edge of the discolored soil, as if daring whatever lay beneath to object. Elias took a breath, let it out, and stepped after her. What he found in that patch, whether buried shard of a dark root or an old druid relic waking up, or the first whisper of a prophecy that had been looking for him since he was born, is another story. The important part is this. By the time the sun had climbed properly over the trees, Darian's farmhouse stood almost empty. The beds were made, the breakfast bowls stacked, the hearth embers slowly settling to a dull red. Only Nara and Elias remained in the lower field, listening to something the rest of the world hadn't noticed yet. And somewhere far above, flying hard toward the river bend, Ronan and Scrila were about to see what happened, that same wrongness, when it finally claws its way into the open.